What happens when the nation's most powerful law enforcement agency is accused of punishing its own agents for doing their jobs? That's not just a political question. It's a direct challenge to the very idea of independence inside the FBI. And in a tense Senate hearing, one senator accused the FBI director of lying, breaking his promises, and bowing to political pressure from the White House. The clash wasn't just about personnel. It was about whether Americans can still trust the integrity of the Bureau itself. The confrontation began with a simple but devastating question. Had anyone from the White House contacted the FBI director about personnel decisions?
Director Patel, thank you for being here today. You'll recall well in January at your confirmation hearing before this committee, I raised the prospect of politically motivated retaliation, and you promised me, as you did other members of this committee, quote, every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard and no one will be terminated for case assignments. You went on to tell me, quote, all FBI employees will be protected against political retribution. And you assured one of my colleagues that you would honor the internal review process of the FBI. I'm not going to mince words. You lied to us. In the short time that you've been FBI director, you've presided over a rash of retaliatory firings. 3 FBI agents have recently sued you. They are FBI agents with 60 years between them of distinguished service, rescuing hostages, saving kids from predators, dismantling drug cartels, and their allegations, their civil allegations, are a searing indictment of your tenure as FBI director. But it's not just those 3. The FBI Agents Association has said that your actions, quote, distract agents from their work, foster fear that their assignments could cost them their careers, either now or under the next administration, and increase the risk of criminal and national security threats by undermining unity and morale within the Bureau, end quote. This association, as you know, is voluntary. It represents 14,000 members, 90% of all the active agents. These are your employees saying that your performance has been unqualified and unfit. And there is mounting evidence that these retaliatory firings were the result of direction from the White House. There have been instances in the past history of the Bureau of political interference and political direction from the director's office, but not the kind of institutional interference that we're seeing from the White House right now. I'm going to ask you, has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
I completely disagree with your entire premise that I have lied or am misleading the FBI. If I were, the results that I announced today by the men and women of the FBI and the historic records we are doing to keep this country safe would not be possible. The men and women of the FBI are responding to our leadership and this administration's priorities. The only way people get terminated at the FBI is if they fail to meet the muster of the job and their duties, and that is where I will leave it. And you accusing me of lying is something I don't take lightly, but I'm not going to get into a tit for tat with you.
Well, let me just ask you to answer my question. Has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
Generally speaking, we always discuss with the White House, OMB, during the budget process, how many personnel we need, who we need where.
Answer is yes.
For budgetary purposes and
to fire people, agents, because they participated in investigations of the president?
I don't receive directions to do that.
Has anyone
I make the
suggested
decisions.
it? Has anyone asked you to do it? The best information is, yes, you've taken suggestions and direction from the White House in firing qualified agents.
Any termination at the FBI was a decision that I made. based on the evidence that I have as a director of the FBI, and it's my job, and I'm not going to shy away from it. And as you stated, those are allegations, and that is an ongoing litigation. So they'll have their day in court, so will we.
The allegations are not just in that lawsuit, Director Patel, and I think your testimony confirms that, in fact, you've taken direction from the White House in those retaliatory firings.
It literally does not.
Because you've acknowledged that, in fact, they have been in contact with you about personnel decisions.
The White House has been, do not put words in my mouth, we're on the record. The White House, like any administration, contacts its agencies on the budgeting process and where it needs personnel and where the mission priorities are. That always happens. If they didn't do that, they would be abdicating their responsibility to law enforcement. I will always work with my partners in the chain of command at the Department of Justice and the White House to ensure that this FBI is delivering the results we are delivering, to include the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history, to include the most fentanyl seizures in modern U.S. history, to include the most lives saved and the most children found in modern U.S. history. That is a working FBI. That is not a failing FBI.
Let's move on to a related area. In White House discussions, have you been asked or directed by the White House or others to engage in a crackdown on political groups or organizations, nonprofits, after the murder of Charlie Kirk?
To direct at political organizations? No. I've been asked by my chain of command to properly root out criminal activity wherever it is in whatever investigation we are conducting, and that's what we're doing.
Have those distinctions about whom you're going to target been based on direction from the White House?
Nobody gives me a list on who to target. My targeting list is from the men and women at the FBI.
Have you talked about investigating certain groups, nonprofits, or foundations or institutions?
Whatever those investigations are, they're ongoing, and I'm not going to get into those.
Have you used polygraphs to determine loyalty of agents?
No.
Have you committed that you will respect the First Amendment rights of agents?
I have wildly committed to respecting the First Amendment rights of agents, but at the FBI, you have to balance your First Amendment rights with your mission.
Have you imposed any sort of loyalty test in the course of using polygraphs or in any of the other personnel decisions?
Polygraphs have been utilized at the FBI for decades. They will continue to be utilized.
At first, the director deflected. He insisted the premise was false, that the FBI was achieving historic results under his leadership, reducing violent crime, seizing record amounts of fentanyl, rescuing more children than ever before. But Senator Blumenthal wasn't asking about performance metrics. He was asking about something deeper, whether politics had poisoned the Bureau's decision-making. And he wasn't about to let the director wriggle away. Blumenthal reminded the chamber of the promises made during the director's confirmation hearing. Back then, Patel pledged that every FBI employee would be judged by the same standards, that no one would be punished because of political retaliation, and that the internal review process would always be respected. Those assurances weren't abstract. They were meant to protect agents on the ground from exactly the kind of backroom interference Congress feared. But Blumenthal accused Patel of betraying that oath, calling his testimony misleading, even dishonest. The senator's evidence was striking. 3 veteran agents, collectively representing more than 60 years of distinguished service, had recently filed lawsuits against Patel. These weren't paper pushers or disgruntled employees. They were decorated operatives who had rescued hostages, dismantled international drug cartels, and tracked predators who targeted children. Their record of service was undeniable, but according to their lawsuits, their careers ended not because of poor performance, but because of retaliation. They alleged they were terminated after working on politically sensitive cases, and the implication was chilling. Agents could lose their jobs not for failing to uphold the law, but for upholding it too well. Blumenthal then cited something even harder to dismiss: the FBI Agents Association. This organization isn't a fringe group. It represents roughly 14,000 members, about 90% of all active agents. In their public statement, they accused Patel's leadership of distracting agents from their mission, creating an atmosphere of fear and undermining morale across the Bureau. The association went further, warning that such fear of political reprisal could increase the risk of criminal and national security threats, because agents might hesitate or abandon critical cases out of concern for their careers. When an organization that large and influential issues a warning that strong, it's not easily brushed aside. Yet Patel was determined to defend himself. He doubled down, insisting that every termination decision was his alone, guided solely by performance standards. If an agent failed to meet the demands of the job, he said, it was his duty to act, no matter how long they had served. He wasn't shy about pointing to results either. He touted the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history, record-breaking drug seizures, and unprecedented numbers of children rescued from trafficking. These, he argued, were proof that the FBI under his command was working effectively, not crumbling under political pressure. But that defense raised another question. Can strong outcomes excuse a flawed process? Blumenthal framed the issue as one of institutional independence. It wasn't enough for the FBI to deliver results. The Bureau had to show that its decisions were impartial, free from the taint of political meddling. Outcomes, however impressive, don't erase concerns that the process itself might have been compromised. Because if agents believe their careers rise and fall not on merit but on politics, how long before the culture of the FBI itself corrodes? That's why the senator returned again and again to his central question. Had anyone from the White House been in contact with Patel about who stays and who goes? This was the heart of the matter. Patel admitted that there was contact, but insisted it was normal, conversations about budgets, staffing levels, and mission priorities. Every administration, he said, has to coordinate with agencies to ensure resources match the nation's security needs. To him, that was part of responsible governance, not interference. But the distinction matters. There's a difference between discussing how many personnel are needed in counterterrorism or cybercrime and directing that specific agents be fired for working on politically inconvenient cases. Blumenthal pressed Patel on whether the line had been crossed. At times, Patel's answers sounded evasive, at other times defiant. He rejected the idea that he had taken directions from the White House to terminate anyone, repeating that firings were based only on evidence and performance. Yet by admitting that there had been contact, he opened the door for critics to claim that political influence had crept in. The consequences of this standoff stretch beyond one hearing. If veteran agents believe the system is rigged against them, they leave. And when they leave, the FBI loses decades of hard-earned experience. Investigations into counterterrorism, organized crime, and narcotics trafficking don't succeed overnight. They require continuity, patience, and deep institutional memory. Replacing that expertise isn't easy. Staff churn and low morale aren't just workplace problems. They're vulnerabilities that hostile actors can exploit at the same time. There's a legitimate need for leadership to enforce high standards. If agents underperform, the public has a right to expect accountability. That's the balancing act. Protect the independence of agents from politics, while still ensuring the Bureau is staffed with professionals who can meet the demands of the job. For viewers watching this drama unfold, the tension is palpable. Is this about justified discipline, or is it about silencing dissent? The next phase won't play out in sound bites, but in oversight and litigation. The lawsuits filed by those agents will force the Bureau to turn over documents, emails, and internal records. Courts will scrutinize whether proper grievance procedures were followed and whether political influence was at play. Inspectors general and congressional committees will likely dig deeper, using their authority to demand transparency. Those processes, not just fiery exchanges in a hearing, will determine whether the accusations of retaliation hold up under scrutiny. And this is where the story widens. Because what's at stake isn't just the careers of a handful of agents or the reputation of one director. It's the credibility of the FBI itself. The Bureau must not only protect the public, but also be seen as impartial while doing so. If citizens begin to suspect that investigations are shaped by political actors, trust in the institution collapses. And without trust, even the most powerful law enforcement agency loses its authority. This is a civic lesson as much as it is a political drama. Effective law enforcement depends on both performance and perception. Leaders must deliver results, yes, but they must also preserve confidence in the fairness of their processes. Independence is not about shielding wrongdoing. It's about ensuring that decisions are guided by law, evidence, and clear standards, not by who holds political power at any given moment. So, what comes next? Keep your eyes on three things. First, watch for independent reviews, inspectors general, congressional subpoenas, and requests for internal documents. Second, follow the lawsuits. Discovery in court will either confirm or contradict the allegations of retaliation. Third, pay attention to morale inside the Bureau. If more agents come forward, the pressure on Patel will only grow. For the American people, the takeaway is simple. Institutions like the FBI don't belong to one party or one administration. They exist to uphold the rule of law. But independence doesn't preserve itself. It requires constant oversight, transparency, and accountability. If the allegations prove true, reforms will be needed to prevent political actors from weaponizing personnel decisions. If they don't, then the public deserves reassurance that the system is still working as intended. This hearing was more than political theater. It was a reminder of how fragile institutional trust can be and how easily it can fracture when promises are broken or accountability is questioned. Whether you side with Patel's defense or Blumenthal's accusations, one thing is clear. The stakes go beyond one clash in the Senate chamber. They touch the foundation of how justice is carried out in America. What do you think? Were these firings the product of tough leadership holding agents accountable, or were they the result of political interference reaching into the heart of law enforcement? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective. And if you want to keep following these hearings, the lawsuits, and the investigations that could reshape the FBI's future, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because the story isn't over, and the truth is still unfolding.